Welcome back to episode 1, part 2 of How to Ace a Job Interview on Kellen's Corner. It's been a little bit long overdue. We've been busy over here placing candidates and helping them interview for jobs, so it's taken us a little while, but we're back and happy to share more information about how to ace a job interview. In this second portion, we're going to cover more good questions to ask, difficult questions, topics, and strategies that come up in an interview, how to talk about salary, which is very difficult and is challenging, and then ultimately, of course, closing the interview and getting that job offer. Killer questions. In part 1 of this episode, we covered a couple of killer questions, which were what are the company goals and how can I look to achieve them, and talking about the best employee of the company and how can you be that. Some additional questions that are going to be very important for you to ask to make a good impression with the interviewer. One is, what are the expectations of the candidate or somebody in this role? Very simple question to ask, but by asking that, it's going to get the interviewer to start talking about some of the tasks and duties that are assigned to this job. And in that answer that they're giving, they're also feeding you more information to be able to elaborate and accentuate some of your skills that you feel like are relevant to the job. So they're also feeding you additional answers by asking that question. Another good question to ask is, if I started here tomorrow, what's the first task that you would have me complete? The reason why that's a good question is because it immediately puts the interviewer thinking that you're in the seat and you're ready to do the job from day one. So they may give you some really good information about, okay, these are the first 3 things that I might want that candidate to do when they get into the role. So again, it's feeding you more information to be able to expand upon once they're done answering that question. And a final and really good killer question is, what attracted you to this company and what keeps you here and motivates you coming in every day? So by asking the interviewer directly what motivates them and why they get out of bed and come to work in the morning, I think is very important, because most people want to work in a company that shares the same values, goals, and motivates them to come to work. So it's a really good question that hits more at the emotional side of an interview than maybe the intellectual side, but that sometimes makes more of an impact than anything. So asking that question along with the others that we've shared will really put you in the best light with the interviewer. Now we're going to cover how to answer some difficult questions and some difficult topics that come up in an interview. One of them happens right at the outset of an interview. You'll have an interviewer ask, "Tell me about yourself." Sounds like a very innocent question, but it can be very troubling and can lead you down a path that is not exactly effective for the interview. You don't want to go telling them about your favorite cat at home or your favorite trip that you just took to the Bahamas if that's not really what they want to hear. If they seem very personal and they want to hear that stuff, by all means, go meet them for a beer after the interview and you can tell them. But we're here to be serious about the interview and get the job. So if somebody says, "Tell me about yourself," you want to redirect them back to your resume and you want to say, "I'd love to tell me about myself. Is there anywhere in particular in my resume or my career history that you'd like me to start?" By doing this and redirecting it back to them, you're giving some context and a framework to the interview so that you're not guessing at what they're looking to hear. So again, it's a way to control the interview without actually controlling it, and give it some context and a framework. Second one is strengths and weaknesses. Most people name a character trait when they're talking about strengths and weaknesses. That's a mistake. Anybody can say a character trait. You can put on paper that I'm an enthusiastic, hardworking individual. It really doesn't hold any weight. So you're looking for something that's a little bit more impactful to the interviewer. Strength is easier. I always say, or we always say at MSI, pick out something that you really enjoy doing the most, or that you feel like you're the best at within your job. That's the easy one for strengths. So that's how you should ask it or answer it in that way. So if you're an accountant and you feel like you're really good at doing financial analysis, well, that's the thing that you should name for your strength. Or if you're an admin and you feel like you're really good at answering the phones and transferring calls, again, it may sound super simple, but for that type of job, that's a very important task. And if you're really good at it, it makes an impact. On the other hand, you have the weakness question. Which of the two is the more difficult to answer? Again, in this aspect, you still want to use something tangible because it helps answer the question and still gives you the opportunity to potentially spin the answer into a positive by the time you're done talking. So you could use something as simple as a software. If the job description has a software on there and they say they need to know SAP, and you don't know SAP, but you may know some other good softwares, you may want to use that and say, look, I'm a very technically savvy person and here's the softwares I have. So while I don't know SAP today, I'm a quick study and I'll know it in the next 30 days, or something tangible like that. So you've answered the question, but you've also spun it into a positive. Or you could use an industry, for example. Let's say you've been in manufacturing for 10 years and this is a real estate company. You could say, look, real estate's a new industry for me, so I'm sure there's nuances that I'm going to need to learn. But again, I'm a quick study, a quick learner, and going to a new industry actually excites me. If you do that and answer it with passion that way, you're going to make that much better an impression. You've answered the question, but again, you've spun it into a positive, which by answering the weakness question, that's really your goal at the end of the day. And now, the scariest and most anticipated part of an interview, talking about salary. Let's get serious about this fearful topic in question, talking about salary. Salary tends to make people very uncomfortable. By the way, it can be uncomfortable for the interviewee and interviewer both. So we're going to give you a couple good tips to be able to answer this question effectively while still driving the best outcome in the job, which is to get an offer at, of course, the highest salary that you can, or the highest compensation. So we really tell people to handle it in two parts. If you're asked what you are currently making or most recently have made if you're out of work, be honest and say what you've been making or do make. In this way, it helps establish a baseline for the person who's interviewing you to be able to understand what somebody else is paying you and what your current value is. So ultimately, at the end of the process, and even being involved as recruiters, we see this, it plants that seed in their head for somebody else is paying Susan or Jeff X amount of dollars, so that if they come with an offer, they understand hopefully it's Y, which means that Y is above X and that you have an offer that is higher than what you're making. So be honest about what you're making or most recently have made, because it plants a seed and establishes a baseline in the company's head for where you need to be from a compensation standpoint. However, part two, and more importantly, if you're asked the follow-up question, well, what are you looking to make? Do not answer it with a number or even a salary range. Even if you answer it with a range, and let's say that you say $50,000 to $60,000 for hypothetical purposes, you heard $60,000 and the interviewer heard $50,000, and then someone's disappointed. So that's why you don't name a range. And if you don't name a specific figure, then you leave us as the recruiters, or even if you're pursuing the job through your own efforts, you leave it open-ended. Remember, it's the company's job to make you an offer, not the other way around. So if you leave it open-ended and you don't commit to a number, you're giving yourself the best chance to negotiate at the end, or for us to negotiate on your behalf if that's the scenario that's in play. So the way that you want to answer that is to say, I appreciate that. I'm much more concerned about whether this is the right opportunity for me or not. I'm sure if I'm the right candidate for the job, you'll make me a fair offer. If you answer it that way, use the word opportunity, say the words fair offer, you will dissolve the situation, and typically at that point, 99.9% of the time, the interview will proceed on. You haven't committed to a number, they understand where you're coming from in salary, and you've left it open-ended that you want the opportunity. So at that point, you're really in the driver's seat as much as you possibly can be to negotiate the best possible offer, whether it's from us or through your own efforts. Now, the most important, closing the interview. In addition to some of the things we covered in part one, which were, is there anything else in my background that I can share, and asking about next steps, this is really, really your opportunity to ask for the job, which is exactly what you want to do in terms of closing the interview. So rather than just shaking a hand and walking out the door and saying thanks for your time, this is your opportunity to express your extreme interest in the job. Say that you want the job. Read between the lines and read your interviewer in terms of how aggressive you can be. If they're very outgoing and you're interviewing with a sales director, for instance, you might want to ask for the job. They almost might be expecting you to ask for the job, and if you don't, it might be a negative reflection. If it's maybe somebody a little bit more reserved, you can still say, look, I'm very interested in this opportunity. I want to be a part of this team. What are the next steps? What else do you need from me? If you do that in a very confident, impactful, and energetic way, you will give yourself the best chance for us or yourself to get that phone call after the interview saying, I have to have that person on my team, which is exactly what you want to leave them with. So leave them with excitement, leave them with the knowledge that you want the job, and you'll give yourself the best chance of success. Thank you for joining us on episode 1 of Kellen's Corner. If you found this information to be helpful and useful, please visit us on our website, follow us on social media, and subscribe to this YouTube channel where we post lots of relevant content and information on the wonderful world of recruiting. If you have an idea for an episode of Kellen's Corner or a topic that you'd like to see discussed, please message or call us and you can look out for it on a future episode. And certainly stay tuned for more where we will continue to cover what's going on in the market, what's going on in recruiting, and all of the relevant topics. Thanks again and see you soon.